Ace, welcome to the Outworker.
Thank you, man. Thank you for having me.
Of course. I appreciate you taking the time. I've been following you and your Undefined brand for a while now and love the work that you're doing. Before getting into Undefined, though, I want to take a step sort of in an opposite direction and hear from your point of view. What does the defined life look like?
Um, so I think for me, like how I visualize somebody who's defined would be kind of a like an acceptance of a certain path or a journey of their life without the realization that there could be other possibilities. It's kind of like an acceptance of a certain possibility, but not everything else. Or maybe like picking a career path and saying, this is what I'm going to do and closing off all other doors and opportunities and ideas. And I think that kind of definition where you kind of put those parameters on yourself is like a mental barrier for everybody, right? Like when we put ourselves kind of in this box, it's like there is no ability to kind of think outside of that. And so when I think about like people who consider themselves defined, like when I think about that idea, it was kind of more of like somebody who's set in stone on like this is what I'm going to do and this is how I'm going to do it, and then it kind of shuts them off from kind of their potential for other things that their life might lead to. And it kind of shuts them off from kind of their capabilities. What I think about, it's like what you're capable of. When you start to define yourself, you start putting these labels on who you are, you start to kind of put yourself in this box, and you definitely like shun off the ability or the potential for anything else. So I think that's kind of my idea of what defined, like, and I don't want that, right? I don't want to just kind of settle and just and be in that space. So that's kind of my idea of undefined, or defined, I'm sorry. Like I don't want that. So yeah, man, that's basically it, just shutting yourself off from your potential of what you can become.
Yeah, I feel like we have society has almost taught us like we need to know who we are. It's a strength to be defined.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but obviously, in your case, and why I've resonated with the work that you do is being undefined and allowing yourself to be free flowing like that is probably the biggest strength that you can have. Did you ever feel like a time in your life where you felt like I'm heavily defined?
um I think I think for me, it's like there wasn't a time where I think for me personally, I've never been in a situation where um, I'm like considering myself to be defined, but it's kind of like a subconscious, I don't know, way of thought process or mentality, maybe. Just kind of thinking about how, as I've grown up, I've had people tell me what I should do or what I should be, and kind of starting to put these labels. Like I think you've probably seen or read. I think it's I think it's the Four Agreements, or it might be the Alchemist, but it's basically the premise of the book. I forgot exactly which title is it, but a lot of what he's talking to, I think, is by Paul Colio or something like that. He's basically talking about how over our life we kind of learn a bunch of stuff, and then we have to unlearn some of those things.
Yeah.
And so I think throughout my teenage years, as I'm starting to go into my 20s, I was trying to please a lot of people, or um, you know, do what society and the world told me I should be doing and how I should be acting, how I should be living. And so that's kind of like that definition that gets put on you. And then you start to define who you are and what you're doing. And then from there, it's a difficult for me. I had a very hard time with that. So that's how I kind of ended up finding the idea or the concept of just being free flowing, being fluid of who I am. So I think like during my while I was growing up, I had to really like I had a lot of those external pressures like we all do. Like as we're growing up, people are telling us how to live our life. We get basically put our the world view is put onto us. And a lot of what we have to do is as we grow. And for me personally, as I was moving through my teenage and college years, which was probably the biggest time that I had this opportunity to do this, I had to unlearn a lot of those things and allow me to kind of pick and choose what is true actually to me, or like what is true to me in that moment. It doesn't even have to be true to me and it's like years down the line, it's the same thing. It's just true to me in that moment. And so, like, as I've been going through my high school, and then when I got to college, I was really unlearning a lot of that stuff. And so, definitely throughout those younger years, I had that opportunity to just kind of unlearn a lot of those types of ideas and those things. And so, that's how I started to kind of chip away. It's like, I don't need this, I don't want this. And that's kind of how I started to get towards undefined, the kind of concept and mentality of it. So, yeah, mainly through my younger years, man, and that was something I definitely had to unlearn.
Yeah, I think that's a fascinating point that you say about unlearning, because I do think we get to a point in our life where it's not so much about continuing to gain and add more stuff to your life, but it's a lot of unlearning and sort of stripping the unnecessary stuff out of your life to basically only needing the necessities. I think one of my favorite quotes from your writing going through your Instagram is, maybe in the pursuit of finding ourselves, we lose ourselves. And the real journey is getting back to the kids we thought we weren't enough. What did, for you, that child version of yourself dream about when, or aspired to?
Um, so for me, man, I'll kind of give you a long-winded answer to this. In my childhood, I've always felt like I had this desire to really just go out and do big things. I've had this internal flame like all my life, as far back as I can remember. And I think a lot of people, you probably had this too, man. A lot of people have this flame and this feeling and idea of like, I want to go out and do big shit. Excuse me, is this a
You're
can I
good.
cuss on
You're
here?
good. you're all good.
I want to go out and do big stuff, man.
The
So
more, the better.
okay. And so I think for me, like I've always had that chip on my shoulder, like this internal flame. I just never knew how to control it. And so as a younger kid, like as I was growing up, it was just kind of the things that I was invested in and I enjoyed at that time. So for me, I was a kid who really loved athletics, and I was at the time just played soccer. That's just what I picked up. And so I was like fascinated with this idea of becoming like a professional soccer player. Like everybody does, right? Every young kid has that feeling of like I want to be a professional athlete or a professional whatever. Um, Especially when they're playing sports. And so for me, I was just fascinated by it. That's like everything that I wanted and everything that I wanted to accomplish. And that dream obviously didn't come true, but like it didn't come true in like the harshest way because I truly wanted it. Like I really wanted something like that, and I didn't even come close, right? So it's just funny because like for me, I always think about that kid who was crushed being told like, man, you're not good enough, like you can't be on a team, or like, oh man, you're sitting on a bench because you're just not offering exactly what we need. I didn't know how to control my flame. I didn't know how to control my work ethic and the things that I wanted to accomplish. And so I kind of just like went all over the place, and I was just passionate, right? And passion doesn't drive passion drives a lot of things, but you also got to know how to hone it. So like when I think about my internal flame, I think about controlling it to actually make it useful, and guiding in the right direction. So, yeah, as a kid, man, that's just all I wanted. I wanted to be an athlete. I wanted to be big time. I wanted people to know me. I wanted people to be like inspired by the things that I do, right? And being such a great player or whatever athlete, or people like, yeah, that's the guy. And so that's my entire kind of childhood mentality. And so for me, I always think about how that dream kind of went to a close, and it came to a close abruptly because how it made me feel. Like I truly hated that feeling of like, oh my gosh, like I'm not going to achieve this dream. I'm not going to accomplish this dream. And so like I got a little bit of regret, a little bit of, these different types of things that came into me. It's like I didn't work hard enough. I didn't do this and that. And when I was younger, that's a blessing for me to learn right off the rip. Um, in my high school and college days, that was a blessing for me to learn. And so I was able to pivot off that and take that lesson and use that lesson in my future. And so for me, like I think I'm just trying to be that kid again. Like I'm trying to attach myself to that kid again who's chasing his dream, but doing it, and I'm not going to quit on it. I'm not going to give up on it. Or I'm not going to just say, oh man, it is what it is. Like I'm actually going to make that young kid proud of what I wanted to do. And of course it's much more emotional for me to like, everybody has those feelings, but for me, like I understand that like when you're younger you have those emotional kind of connections. So I connect to that kid a lot. because I know how he felt, and I still have that feeling inside of me till this day. Like I know what that feels like. And so that's definitely a dream that I had that, obviously just came short, and obviously that's a blessing, but it's something that the lesson that I sticks with me the most, definitely comes from that kind of failure of my dream when I was a kid. So,
Were there ever any moments in your life where you felt like that flame within you was either flickering or ever out? And if
oh yeah,
so, how'd you get it back?
I think, dude, for me, I've had experiences where my flame definitely has died down. When I was younger, after being like just dreams starting to cut off and stuff like that. When I was younger, being told, no, you can't be on a team. Oh, you're not good enough. Put you on a bench. Things like that. What I found, and you can let me know about your thoughts about this. I've had a few moments, times when I was younger. I don't know exact time dates during COVID. Um, Things like that. Have had actually a moment in the last year that I kind of had a 2 or 3 month spree where I was not having I was my flicker was kind of gone, right? Um, and what I found was oftentimes when our when we're not committed to the actions that we want to do, we kind of our that flicker goes away, right? So if you take a break for something for a long time, for me at least, when I take a break for 2 weeks, whether it's mentally, physically, just thinking about my intentions on something, that flame starts to go die down. And so how I think about it is like I have to tend to this flame. Like I have to give it wood. I have to give it the spark or whatever, embers or whatever you got to put in that
Yeah.
flame to keep it going, right? And especially if it's something that you truly love, like if it's your dream, man, and you start letting go. I think a lot of people do this, man. I think this is why we see so many people who've had big dreams in their life, and they eventually start to kind of like starts to wane down. They have a moment where they don't practice, they don't put anything into it, they don't try to move that needle forward and try to tend to their flame. And so what ends up happening is it starts to die down. And I think once you get to a point, eventually, some people like once that flame goes out, like, you're not bringing that back out, man. Like for most people, that's not something that you just revive, right? So, um, yeah, so I've had times like in my life where definitely during COVID, like when the gyms were closed and stuff, and I didn't even have like any sort of inspiration. I was just stuck at home here. I was basically here in Kansas City, stuck at home. And I think everybody felt kind of these feelings, but there was nothing, right? It was just the same. You wake up, you go get some food, and come back upstairs, like, and you're not actively pursuing your dreams and your goals. And so, definitely, I had those times where my flame started to die down, but yeah, man, I definitely say during like the times where I didn't have the opportunity to be active on stuff, things that I enjoyed, it started to flicker away.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more there. And that's definitely something I really resonate with. And I know you're a huge proponent of the book, and it's a book that I also love, The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield.
Mm-hmm.
Um, about that internal resistance and needing to take action instead of contemplation. And just a little background sort of on me and with this podcast, I probably contemplated, I knew I wanted to do this podcast for a while, and I contemplated it for a very long time. And probably that like 3 to 4 months before I actually started the podcast, I lost that sort of edge to myself, and that internal flame was starting to flicker, and it carried over into all other aspects of my life. Like I felt like I wasn't as energetic in the gym. Like I feel like I just like didn't have that mental edge in the gym. I feel like I wasn't, just didn't have that mental clarity. And when I started this podcast, it was almost like it came back immediately. And it goes to, what you're saying is, you know, you can't have that contemplation, because once you have that sense of contemplation and that little doubt, it'll take over very, very fast.
Yeah, dude, I completely agree with that. Like once you start having that contemplation, the feelings of like questioning yourself, those things really start to take over your headspace. And because it takes over your headspace, you're not actually focused on tending to the flame, right? And so the
Exactly.
flame just starts to die down on its own. And so yeah, dude, I 100% agree with that. And I always like I always think that's why it's super important to be aware of where your headspace is and what you put into your headspace. Whether it's doubt or whether it's like the world shit that's happening in the world, whether it's people who are telling you their baggage, all of that stuff, man. Like the more that you have in your headspace, that's not like, you know, your awareness to be focused on the flame or the acts or the actions that you need to take, the more that it becomes difficult to truly tend to it. And so like cleaning that shit out, when it's just like sometimes you just got to take a step back and you can't just be so engulfed in it, is super important. Just making sure that your headspace is right, so you can actually be, you know, present for your dream or present for your actions that you got to take. It's so important.
Yeah, and I think if you're able to find that sort of one or two, if you're just at the start, if you're able to find that one or two daily actions that you can take, it's a game changer. And I feel
Yeah.
like that's what really resonated with me where I was starting this podcast, where it was, okay, I am going to start recording episodes. I am going to start reaching out to people to, hey, would you come on my podcast? And it just totally gets you into a different mindset of, hey, I'm actually taking actions and sort of pushing the ball forward. Because when you're just thinking about it, you're just staying in this very paralyzed state where you're only thinking and not actually doing. And it's not healthy for any part of yourself.
Right. Yeah. And you know, that reminds me, that kind of alludes to the something I was thinking about earlier, and somebody pointed this out to me, is like there are so many ideas in the world, like so many, like the world is abundant in ideas. Every moment we have ideas.
Yeah.
And what really truly makes the difference between an artist or somebody who builds or an athlete or the greatest of all time or really somebody who's truly doing stuff is not the idea, it's the execution on the idea and your ability to link those two. Like the difference between an amateur and a master is his ability to put the idea into execution and then work out the details and work out, you know, the entire process. And so you know, when we just think about the ideas, oftentimes we you know, many people just completely forget about, you know, the fact that the actual way to get to where you're trying to get to is the execution, and obviously you got to put the actions in. But you know, that's what separates amateurs and masters. It's like your ability to make ideas happen in the real world and linking those two.
Yep. 100%. Going back to, I think it was in a YouTube video that you just posted with the audio that you said that when it came to Undefined, it wasn't some grandiose, mind boggling aha moment for me. It was an acceptance of who I was. And I feel like the realest, most authentic things, whether it's brands or a podcast or a book, whatever it's some type of thing that we want to put out into the world, I feel like it comes from an expression of who we are as a person, whether it's through our experiences or honestly the challenges that we're able to endure and overcome. You know, when it came for me in this podcast, the name of it is The Outworker. You know, that's not a, you know, I didn't think of, all right, what, well, obviously I did. I was like, what do I want to name this podcast? But it's not like I had to, it's like, this is a name that like I feel, and this is something that resonates with me. And the tagline for it is the relationship with oneself is the most important to develop, but also the easiest to neglect.
Mm.
And I didn't think of that. You know, that's something that I felt and lived because I've been on both sides of that. So for you getting into Undefined, on that spectrum between creation and expression, and I already know what you're going to say here, but where do you stand within that spectrum between, hey, this is something I created and this is something that, you know, I am?
Um, that's a good question, man. And I think, wait, what, what do you think I'm gonna say about this? And I'll kind of let you know if I'm
I,
thinking the same thing.
I mean, I would say that, you know, with the undefined philosophy, you know, that's something that you are,
Mhm.
but it's going to get to a point where it does have to feel like creation from like the brand and business side of things.
Right.
But the brand and business side of things can't flourish without that expression.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and that's exactly how I feel currently in the moment too. And I think that's something I'm struggling with as a creator or a business or an artist in general, is linking those two. That expression self is me. And I think when I first set out to make Undefined as a brand, it's still the idea, but it's how do I put that into the real world, right? How do I, you can't, like I said, we can't just have an idea without executing. How do I make those ideas get into garments? And how do I kind of free myself from the idea of just like having to have a perfect thing that always, how do I just make more stuff, even if it's an expression? Maybe I don't always have to explain it. Maybe I don't always have to do, this type of big, marketing piece around it so it makes sense for everybody. Maybe it just has to make sense for me. And so, as an artist and as a business person, I'm still trying to figure out exactly that balance between creation and expression. I think it is honestly just both at the same time. The brand is who I am, but it's also me presenting pieces of who I am in a certain way, right? um, I think it's kind of, no pun intended, it really is kind of just undefined as to what it can be, and what it should be, right? It's just like I allow myself hands off, and like if I'm feeling something, I put my work into that, and that I just let that go. And if I'm not feeling something in a year, I don't go back and revisit it and do something again with it. And so I kind of think it's just in that moment, what am I feeling? And what should I create out of what I'm feeling in that certain expression? And I just take a piece of it. I take two pieces of it and I try to execute on something that I can actually put out into the real world. If it's, in the sense of my business, same with the content, man. If it's something that I'm actually really wanting to work on and I have time on and I want to create like a cool piece or idea or writing, it's something I'm truly feeling at that moment. So it's an expression, but it's also, honing that expression into a way where I can, put it out into the world and people can utilize it um how they see fit, right? So I think it's both, and I'm definitely trying to find that mix for me. Let me know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, I love that, and I feel like going off of that, I feel like it's such a party phrase when you hear, whether it comes to content or clothing or whatever it is. With when you're talking about a brand, people say, "Oh, that's not on brand. Like we can't do that. That doesn't fit into our brand." And it doesn't allow for sort of natural things to occur because you never know. Like you just got to put stuff out there, and the market will decide if they think it's good or not. And people get scared of, oh no, like we got to stay in our lane. This is who we are, and you don't allow for sort of things to evolve or sort of just live on their own and see how it may or may not work.
Exactly, yeah, and that's something that I've always, even like when I first started Undefined, I was like, dude, I had enough experience with myself that I was like, I'm just going to, like, it was an intentional naming as well. Like, I didn't just, I went from actually another name, Tiny Collective. It was like my just
Oh,
the
really?
idea that I first had, and then it went to Undefined. And the reason that I did that, you know, the brand name is important, all that stuff, but it really just kind of in the beginning, it was like a freeing of just what I'm gonna do. Like 2 years ago, what I would do is not the same as what I do now, and I don't need to stick into that same lane. And obviously, we're just getting started, so it's kind of hard to put those in a perspective. But yeah, I think a lot of people do that. Like they get stuck into this situation where it's like people know me for this, or people know our brand or what we're trying to do for this, and we shouldn't change. And it's like, dude, that's just such a slow death. Like you don't want to be in a position where you're quote unquote defining yourself as this is what I am because the world is wants me to be this. It's like, why would you ever do that? You're never going to put out good enough work. You're never going to put out excellent pieces. You're never going to put out your best work if everything is just a past figment of yourself. You can't connect to it. You can't, relate to it. And so you always want to be able to move and adapt, whether that's in a business, whether that's 20 people who are moving and adapting, or whether that's just you carrying something in your content or your podcast, whatever, right? So I completely agree with that, man.
Where did, I guess it goes for your Instagram handle as well, actually. Where did the name Tiny Collective and the Tiny Boy come from?
Honestly, man, it was just something that I found. Like I liked it. I liked it in high school. I was always like, I'm the tiny boy. I would just say that shit in high school all the time, man. I was just like, tiny. I heard it from some streamer, man. I forgot who it was. But he would just call people tiny. Like it was just like a gym thing. And so I'd always just go up to my friends and be like, you're tiny, boy. I just keep going from there, man. So back in high school, like the year after I left high school, I went into college. I was like, gonna make a page. It's gonna be the Tiny Boy Gains, and then I changed my name to the Tiny Boy. So that's just what it is, man. I don't know if I'll ever change it. I just kind of like it. It's just what it is.
I love it. What role, sort of, I guess you're saying tiny boy gains, what role does fitness in the gym and kind of like pushing yourself physically, what role has that played sort of just throughout your entire journey?
Um, dude, when I was younger, after not having the ability to, I was always an athlete, so not having the ability to practice soccer or do stuff like that, I was losing my balance to like what I wanted to do. Like I was confused. So I just did pick up the gym, which is a blessing. And it was at first, like I think a lot of people, it's just something that you physically want to do, just kind of look better, get some abs, whatever. And as time went on, I do enjoy the gym, but as time went on, like it really was something different for me. It became like now it's more of an anchor for me. Obviously, I want to train. I want to improve on my physical strength and all that stuff and the physical attributes. But the more that I've been in the gym, the more that I have the ability to train and practice and work on myself, I understand that there's like a legitimate benefit to it outside of just the physical stuff. And I think everybody says this, but there is like, if you're truly intentional with actually the physical training and all that stuff, you're truly intentional with it. Like there is a huge gold mine of opportunity for you to like really tap into different pieces of your brain and to like see why you're skimping out on a an exercise or why you're just quitting early. It's like, you can have those conversations with yourself and they translate directly into the real world, man. I think it's one of the few places where like every action that you like everything in the gym, everything in training is literally a direct correlation to your progress in life, because it's the only way, man. Like you have to put in the reps in real life. You have to be able to stick consistent with some stuff in real life. It's just the direct correlation. And so if you can have that um mentality in the gym, you can definitely utilize that mentality in the real world. And so for me now, man, like as it relates to my brand and stuff, for training division, I think of it as like an expansion of myself. So I think of it, the tagline for us is endless expansion of self. And I think about that as the connection between mind and body. So just putting yourself in a position where you're pushing those walls, boundaries, whether it's physically or just mentally, man, having the ability to just do more, just like push yourself just a little bit, go to that distance where you're struggling, but you're like, fuck it, I'm going. Um, that, that type of, that type of thing is definitely something I'm always seeking every week, every day. I'm just trying to push that just a little bit, whether it's a lot or a little, or maybe it's just nothing at all. Maybe it's just staying stagnant for one day. I'm always trying to push that though forward, and so I kind of have a bigger capacity and capability to do stuff. So, anyways, for me, man, that's like the mind and body is an expansion part, and I think the more that we can work on ourselves, the more that we have the potential to grow, the more that we expand on who we are, we can express ourselves a little bit better. And
100%.
so I
Yeah.
always I always connect, the mind and body is the expansion, which is the training division part of our brand, and then undefined is going to be the expression part, which is kind of the spirit. And so that's how I've connected them in terms of my brand, and that's how I'm going to keep trying to, push that into the world and market that the best ability that I can. So it's very crystal clear to people kind of what we're doing. So yeah, man.
Yeah, 100%. And I came to the realization, and I had this thought while I was working out. But I had the thought that definitely for me, but I feel like for everyone, our greatest gift is our mind, and our body is a tool to unwrap that gift. Um, I feel like when I was big into, I still am big into working out, but I started getting into working out because it was strictly physical. I was just focused, 100% on the physical. And then once you start doing it, you realize that you are tapping into a totally different part of yourself. And that part of yourself is completely mental and emotional. Um, and another quote that I saw from your Instagram is that you said that when I was younger, I really wanted people to believe in me. but now I really just want them to believe in themselves. Is there a specific moment that you can point to where that belief in yourself really switched on?
I I can't think of a specific moment, but I can think of kind of a specific environment and feeling. When I was in college, I didn't really have a lot of friends. That was just my mentality. I was just locked in on me, man. So I my kind of feeling and environment during college time, which was kind of when this internal feeling of confidence, internal feeling of kind of belief in myself started to spring up, was I was putting in so many actions, and I was realizing some people were really interested in the things that I had to say to myself. A lot of my writing was actually just to myself. And so I was like, I'm at a position in place where I've put in all this work into myself. I've started to really learn who I am. I've grown as an individual. I let myself go of all these definitions. I'm just, being who I need to be in the moment, whatever feels natural, whatever feels right, and trying to move towards my goals and the things that I want in my life. And so for me, I kind of like noticed that I was done trying to impress people. I was done trying to do all these different types of things, man. And I was just confident in who I was and confident in what I was doing because I was putting those bricks down, man. I was doing what I had to do. And so like I was done, looking for validation. I was done for all that stuff, man, because I was just locked in on myself. I just had that. I had school. I had, a little bit of content. I was doing a writing, and I was just learning, man. I was learning so much about myself in the world, whether it was through books or just, the practice of my life. When I have so much of that alone time, I was able to really start to gain a lot of that confidence and belief in who I was. Um, because I was locked in on myself, man, and I was facing all my fears, all my insecurities. I was facing everything that I sucked at, and I was just okay with it. And that's how I kind of that environment is what really shaped me into having a lot more belief in who I am. And I think that's something we got to always work on. But that was something I had a blessing to just be able to be in with myself, be locked in with myself, and grow in that sense.
Do you think people have a fear of solitude and being in an environment like that?
I I mean, I will say this, man. It is a very difficult environment for some people. I think some people strive in it. I didn't think I was going to strive in it, and I forced myself to. There was times where I wasn't depressed because I was in solitude, but I was depressed because of other factors in my life um, that made that experience a lot more difficult. But I still pushed through it, and so I will say that it is very difficult, and sometimes, and some people really do struggle to kind of take. I think a lot of people put shit, whether it's friends or people who, might not serve them, anybody, man, whether it's people or whether it's drugs, whether it's addictions, whatever it might be, to kind of space themselves from the true conversations that they have to have for themselves. And I get it, man. It's not easy, but I definitely do think people shy away from confronting who they are. And I think that solitude aspect, you know, it's something that you do have to, like, you have to have the courage and the capability to kind of step up to that, and to be okay with you for a little while, whether you suck or whether you're bad or whether you're good. I think it's kind of, it's a difficult thing, but I think a lot of people do avoid it, and it's something that people do have to tap into eventually, man. I think a lot of people, that's what leads to a lot of people having midlife crises, or having experiences where they're like, I don't know who I am or what I do. It's because they've never actually learned who they are. They never had that time where they, took a break or took a space and just kind of grew with themselves. And so, yeah, I think a lot of people do, space away from it, but I understand it's not something that's easy,
Yeah,
for many
100%.
people.
Yeah, 100%. And I've kind of believed that I feel like if we're constantly in a group setting, you get to a point where you really don't know who you are because you're kind of just acting and living and thinking in accordance with a group. And if you're not in those times of solitude and alone time where you can find out who you truly are, you kind of get separated from that person, or you're not never even introduced to that person and you don't know who that person is. Um, and I feel like when you talk about personal development, and I talked about this actually in a previous episode, when we talk about different types of development, whether it's career development, social development, brand development, you need to be in those types of settings. And I feel like when it comes to personal development, like personal development, that's like a singular type of thing. Like that's
Right.
like you versus you, like me trying to develop whom I am as a person. So I feel like it's kind of tough to talk about personal development and separating it from, you know, that solitude or alone time.
Yeah, without a doubt. I like how you phrase that, man. Um, like yeah, like you said, like for me personally, like you just said about how there are different types of developments. I was so focused on the personal development, I struggled with other different developments, man. Like I currently, my social development is I put so much time in my own self that I struggle to communicate with people after a while. Like I was very extroverted, and over time I struggle to like have like
I was the same way.
a legitimate conversation. But obviously, I got better with that over time. But it was hard for me, man. And so, like, I think, like you said, that's beautifully put. Like, there are different spaces that you need to be able to manage, and whatever you see fit is for whatever direction you want to go is kind of you got to manage all of them. You got to figure out what fits the boat for yourself. So
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, I would even say that, personal development can make the other things flourish potentially.
yeah,
I feel like if you just focus on like career development, that's not necessarily going to make personal development flourish. But if you focus on personal development, I feel like that can make other types of developments flourish.
right.
You talked about also earlier how your writing was messages to yourself, and that's something that also really resonated with me. Where the stuff that I put on social media, I feel like it's pretty much just like an open dialogue journal, where it's like these are just messages that I thought of that I tell myself in the moment. And I know on your Twitter, you say your tweets are messages to self. So I wanted to know how that kind of relates to Undefined, and how does building Undefined kind of feel like a brand to yourself?
Yeah, I mean, the cool thing for me right now is Undefined is kind of a solo project, so it does directly relate to myself.
Yep.
But as stuff grows and things, people come under the wing, people get interested in what you're doing or want to be a part of it. It can be difficult to kind of figure out how to put all those pieces together for myself, at least because I'm new to that. I don't know exactly how to. I haven't had that experience yet, so putting somebody else and meshing our ideas together into something. So for me, yeah, like you said, a lot of everything that I write is just a message to myself. And I know undefined is connected with me, but really the things that I'm working on, I'm trying to separate the two, not because I don't think they're important together, but because I want undefined and that idea to be really about the people and not about what I am. Obviously that's going to take a lot of work for me, but it does. I do try to not separate the two in terms of the ideas, but the things that just kind of a free flowing state, right? It's just like undefined is what it is, and I'm who I am, and I obviously lead that charge in that brand. But the ideas that I put out are really just concepts maybe that will go into undefined, or just a conglomerate of ideas that go into undefined. It's kind of like a full like circle around, whether it's in that moment or in that month or in that season or collection. And so I'm still trying to kind of piece together how obviously I lead that front. You got to set that vision, you got to set everything in terms of the brand as the leader, but I also do want it to kind of evolve and let it be what people want it to be. You know what I'm saying? Not, whatever they need it to be. That's kind of how I see branding. It's like whatever somebody visualizes and feels undefined should be for them, however they define it, however they, relate to it. That's their thing, man. And I want it to be their thing. So I'm trying to separate the two, but at the same time, I'm allowing kind of, obviously I'm leading it. So I'm kind of allowing them converge, but I'm trying to separate them too at the same time and just letting things be for the people and less about, maybe the ideas and thoughts that I even put out. So
So at the end of the day, do you want, let's say best case scenario for you, do you want your name Ace in Undefined to be very well known, or would you want yourself to kind of be sort of very separated from that? Maybe not even a lot of people know you and people are just fully focused on Undefined. And to just to add on to that, I feel like with the best brands, like my favorite brand, and I know it's a brand that you love as well, is Nike. I had no idea who Phil Knight was until I was in Barnes and Noble and I picked up Shoe Dog and I was like, oh, Phil Knight. I was like, oh, this guy created Nike.
right.
So, so I want to know what are your thoughts on that between sort of you growing your name with the brand and sort of like you kind of being in the shadows almost, and it's like Undefined is like the thing that everyone knows.
If you told me this 2 years ago, I'd be like, ideally, I would separate the two and call it good, man. Because I actually dislike putting myself out there. Like, I really don't
Yeah,
enjoy it. It's not something I always enjoy, man. Sometimes I'm like okay with it, but for the most part, I would rather not make content. Would rather not have my face and speak to people. I'd rather not write stuff and put it out. It is a stage of vulnerability. It is a stage of sometimes you question whether you have anything to say, right?
yeah,
That people are interested in. And so for me, like if you told me 2 years ago, if I wanted to be, a forward face in Undefined, I would probably tell you no. But as kind of the market is headed and all these different types of things, I understand the value in having somebody at least being a forward face. I think a lot of what branding has become and is becoming over time is truly just like it's a reputation, but it's also like an idea of people. Like it's become more from it's become like in like Pepsi, Nike days, like those were companies, and now it's like
yeah.
about people, and like people want to do stuff with people, and like they want Undefined to feel like a person. And whether or not that's, I don't want it to feel like me, but I want it to feel, I don't know how to say this, but I want it to
No,
feel like them, right?
that's perfectly said. I think that's genius. You're right. It doesn't have to be you, but it has to be connected to. It's got to have some type of human touch.
Right.
It can't just feel like people want to know. I feel like a lot of the best brands and getting more so into the fitness side of things. I look at brands like, I don't know if you know the brand Bear Performance Nutrition, but like Nick Bear,
Yeah.
he's like the man behind that, and people feel like I have a connection to that person from this brand. Raw Nutrition with Chris Bumstead. This isn't getting into clothing, but like those types of brands, like you were saying, is like it has that human touch. It doesn't necessarily have to have like the specific person, but you need to have that human feel to it.
Yeah, and I think all those brands do amazing jobs in showcasing, those people. How I think about it, and I don't know, this is just my thoughts off the moment. Those people are like hero figures. Like Nick Bear, he's a fucking monster. Chris Bumstead, he's a monster. A lot of those people who have made big brands and done stuff, they're really good at what they do, man. And they're really good at presenting what they do, and they're really good at showcasing what they do and how well they do it. And so for me, like I've always thought about that and how I refuse to do that. Like I don't want to be somebody who people are like, you're the best, and like I refuse. Like I don't
Yeah.
enjoy that. I don't want somebody to tell me, you're that guy. I don't think those people are doing that on purpose. They're, that's just the position and place that they're at. They're just so good at what they do. People really respect and love them. They're kind of these heroes. Um, but for me, off the top of my head of just thinking about Undefined, I definitely just I want people to feel like, and I think Nike does this really well. Of course, they're just a different beast now because just how huge they are. But I want people to truly feel like in the small stage, at least, that Undefined is about them and there's just somebody else running with them. You know what I'm saying? Undefined is just like whether it's me, whether they feel, like think of it as me just running with them, or whether they think of it as kind of a brand and idea that's running with them, or something they can relate to. Like that's how I kind of want it. I want them to be kind of that hero figure, and me just be like, yeah, you go, bro. And like Undefined be like, yeah, you go, bro. Like that's how I think about it. And I think there are brands who do that really well. I can't necessarily think about any off the top of my head, but I think there are some really cool brands who who link um, both putting out the, focusing on the consumer and the individuals who are actually being part of the product, as well as having a kind of forward face. Off the top of my head, I can think of I don't know if represent George Heaton. I don't know if you know who that is, but
No.
I mean, he's a freaking beast of an athlete. He's running a huge luxury clothing brand right now, and he's doing all these different things. He's super cool. You should follow him. But I think he's done a good job of just like keeping himself on the side of his brand and his business, as well as being forward facing, but not being like the guy who's like everybody's like, yeah, that's that guy.
Yep.
He allows his consumers to kind of feel a part of the brand, make it feel like a huge community, and that's something that I'm aspiring to. I'm not saying that those other hero dudes don't do that. They definitely do, but it's just off the top of my head things that I'm thinking about.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like it kind of gets into like, hey, I'm the one who's doing the dirty work. Like I'm the one who's doing the work and sort of creating this. Like I'm not going to be sort of necessarily the mascot, but like I'm the one who's creating this. Is that kind
Right.
of what it feels like for
It
you?
it does feel like this sometimes for me. Like I know I do have that a little bit of ego. It's like, yeah, dude, I'm fucking making this shit. But for me, like I'm just thinking of, like I always think about, like when I'm having this conversation with you, like I want, like if you're, let's say you buy an undefined product, like I want you to feel like you're connected to that community and that idea, and like I'm right there with you, like running together. I don't want it to feel like me as somebody who's running the business, whether it grows to a $200 million company or not. I don't want it to feel like I'm leading that pack. I want it to feel like we're running together, you know what I'm saying? um and whether or not, I don't want to put myself above anybody, I don't want to put myself under anybody, whether it's your people that we employ in 10 years or whatever, right? It's just, I want it to feel like it's just one movement, one idea, one brand, and there's nobody who's necessarily the forward face or not, right? So that's how I think about it.
Yeah, and I think one thing to add onto that, just not me or people connecting with your brand and with you. One guy that I've really started to follow and I like, his name's Todd Melanie. He used to be the former CMO for Noble, and he said the best brands in the world don't just connect their consumers or connect people with the brand. What they do best is they connect people with themselves. And I feel like that's what Undefined is also about, because, when I found you and your work and sort of the mantra behind Undefined, yes, of course, I got connected with the brand, but I got much more connected and in tune with myself, which I think is the strongest thing that can possibly happen for a brand, is when people sort of connect with themselves stronger, because then that's going to make the relationship that they have with the brand even stronger.
Yeah, I really love that, man. I love that quote. That's something that I gotta go follow this dude now, man. That's a beautiful quote, and definitely, always working on that. It's not something, if anybody out there has a business, or for your podcast or anything, man, anything you're trying to work on now is becoming a brand, and it's a reputation, and working on that and really honing that is a very difficult skill. It's something that you got to let go of all your ego, and really just like be okay with putting work and putting stuff out there and letting it be for the consumer, and letting it be whatever they see fit, and allowing them to kind of relate to it. So it's definitely something that I'm always working on, something that I'm trying to get way better at, and just kind of letting myself go of all these feelings of whether or not it's good enough or not, and just actually putting out good work, and doing that stuff for Undefined. So, but I love that quote, man.
Yeah. So getting more so into, the brand and specifically the clothing side of things, you could have, when it comes to the undefined philosophy, you could have been, all right, I'm going to be an author. I'm going to write a series of books on this undefined philosophy. You could have been a painter. You could have been a photographer and said, I'm going to try to use photography to display this undefined philosophy. When did you first realize that apparel could play a role, and maybe the best role for, this undefined philosophy?
Uh, I don't know if I necessarily had a moment where I was like, apparel is definitely the thing. I think, I told other people this. I think it was kind of just the thing I first thought of. And I think everybody thinks of clothing right off the rip, man. They're
Yeah.
just like, I want to start something. Let's do clothing.
Yeah.
Um, and so I kind of I think that's how I first started moving that direction. And then I was like, wait a moment, this is a lot harder than what I thought. And wait a moment, is this actually how I'm going to do it well? And I think nowadays, man, outside of the fact that I do enjoy making clothing, I think you can really, like you said, you could do photography, you could do all these things and focus your efforts there. But I think for me, as I've grown as an individual, I've accumulated a lot of these different types of skills. And I think that it's less of just focusing on like a product, and it's really more of the entire idea, like you said, all these different types of things, like the like, I don't think of it as a, we sell clothes, but I think of it as like, okay, I need to really make a cool piece of writing, or I need to make a cool photography shoot here and there. And I'm obviously I have so much more work to do on this front. But, I think of it as a conglomerate of just ideas, and then clothing is the product we sell. It's like, here's everything we give you, and here's our product that's 100%, the best product in the world, right? Do what you got to do with it, and that's our standard. And then everything else is what we add on top of it. And that's how I think about it. I think of excellent product as the standard, and then everything else is what I add on top of it, and that's photography and uh, the ideas, and whether it's my writing or whether it's, ideally in the future it's going to be legitimate, like, full on newsletters of things that people can use for their week. And like, that's how I think about it, right? I think about just putting all of this together. This is the idea, this is what we are helping you shape yourself with. And then, hey man, we sell clothes too if you want to cop one. I'm still trying to, work through that. But I think for me, clothing is fun. I like making clothing. I think it's a good means and medium for everything. And it is a certain type of, I want people to, feel like they're wearing a little bit of armor. Like, you know clothing has a certain, it's a physical thing, right? They can feel it. It's a little different than just a book. It's a little different than just a writing piece. It's something that they can wear and take around with them. And so whether that's an idea of undefined, or that's, the logo, it says undefined on there, and they're like, this is that piece that I want to wear today. So I'm kind of trying to mingle with it and figure it all out for myself. But that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah, it goes to another book that, I know I've seen you post, and it's another book that I love as well. Emotion by Design by Greg Hoffman. It goes to that, when you're able to create that emotional connection when somebody puts on a t-shirt, and they, it feels special wearing that t-shirt, that's powerful, because, branding comes down to, I could buy a t-shirt for $5, or I could buy a similar t-shirt, but it has the logo on it, and I would pay, $60 or $70 because of that emotional connection with it. um
Yeah.
so I mean, what's been the biggest challenge for you when it comes from translating that undefined philosophy into undefined clothing and apparel?
If I'm being realistic right now, the biggest challenge for me is myself. Like, um, I'm not in a position. I really appreciate people who like tell me, it's like, man, you're doing it really good. You're doing this, you're doing that. And it's like, dude, like, I always tell people, it's like, dude, I'm just starting on this. Like, I'm
That's the
in a
way
position.
that's the way it should be.
That's the way it should be. Right, right. That's exactly how it is. But that's how I truly like feel about it, man. And I think, there's a lot of people who do huge things, big, huge motherfucking businesses, and they're always like day
I
one.
feel like I'm throwing a lot of different quotes at you here, but
Right.
one of my other favorite quotes is from Gary Vaynerchuk. He says, like, everyone talks about, like, don't listen to the boos, don't listen to the haters. He goes, but I'll tell you one even better: don't listen to the claps, and don't listen
Right.
to the people who are praising you.
Exactly, man. And that's I love that. I've heard that from him, right? And that's something that I truly take into account, because I get people who message me from Like I've had people who message me from across the world be like, man, I love what you do. I love this. I want to buy Undefined. And I'm just getting started with it. So I really just allow myself to I'm like, dude, I have so many barriers that I got to work through. Like I got to work through my ability to execute on ideas. I got to work through my ability to get more shit done. Like, so for me, like Undefined is what it is, and the biggest barrier is me because I'm the solo game right now. And to grow it and to really move it forward, as an entrepreneur, as somebody who's trying to build this, as a leader of it, I need to be able to work through all of that and get through all those different types of internal barriers, whether it's my work ethic, or whether it's me getting shit done, or whether it's my ability to put out ideas, or whether it's my ability to have the courage to put out ideas. Like there's so many different types of things that I got to work through for myself. And so I would consider myself the biggest challenge. Like I think nowadays, man, if you really want to build anything, anybody can build anything. It's like, are you willing to go through that process with yourself? Are you willing to really do what you got to do to get this thing made or not? And so I always think about that. Like every day I wake up, I'm like, I have Undefined here and I need to push this needle forward. And the only motherfucker who's going to do that is me. And so let's do it. Like, let's figure this shit out. So,
Do you feel like that humility though, and that sort of that constant sort of belief of, hey, I'm the one who's kind of holding myself back, or I'm the one who's got to keep pushing this forward? Do you feel like that's also your biggest strength in a way?
of course, man. And it's a chip on my shoulder. It's something that's pushing me forward every day. It's something that's telling me, man, you got to really, go the distance. When I make product, it's like, is this really, are you really making product, or are you kind of just bullshit and throwing something together? Like, are you really trying to put in the effort and hours? It's a chip on my shoulder, but it's something that, I carry with me in a good way. I don't know if that's inherent. I think a lot of people do have kind of that inherence, like you got to do more, you got to do that. Um, and I'm trying to reason with it. I think it's something that's beneficial for me. It's something that it's not something that eats at me away. There has been times where I'm like, oh shit, dude, like it can be like maybe you're not doing enough, man. Maybe you need to, maybe this is not the thing for you if you really can't put this together. There have been those times, but those are natural, man. So I definitely think it's a strength, but something every day that I carry on my shoulder. And I would consider myself somebody who's had that experience to be self-aware. So I would consider myself self-aware, and those feelings of like I can manage it. You know what I'm saying? I know when I'm being really hard on myself or when I'm like being legit. When I'm like, dude, you gotta figure this shit out. Like you got to accomplish this. You got to do this. You got to finish this. I can manage that because I've had that experience to be able to manage that. Right. That's a blessing that I've had in my college years, as we talked before. Having
Yeah,
that solitude time. So
yeah. It's another one of your messages that I wrote down here. There's a fine line between excuses and being kind to yourself in this pursuit. I'm still trying to navigate it, and I feel like I'm the same way. It's a constant push and pull. I feel like you never have it fully realized. You never know when you're supposed to pull back or when you're supposed to push forward. I feel like I'm the type of person, and you're probably also the type of person where it's like, if I'm gonna lean one way, I'm probably gonna push on the gas, then take my foot off the gas.
right.
Um, but it's a constant push and pull, give and take that you never feel like you like fully have figured out. I feel like,
Yeah, and I agree with that, man. I think a lot of it is backed by the. I always think of it as like a results based type of thing. Like, what's my
yeah,
result, man? You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
what's the truth happening here? Am I bullshitting myself, or am I actually accomplishing some stuff? Like, if I'm having a hard time with something and I'm not being, I'm like, oh man, maybe this is not it. I look at the facts. I look at the truth. Am I accomplishing stuff? Am I really moving that needle forward, or is it not happening? And I can, address that truth, whether it's positive or negative for myself. And I think that fine line, I always try to link it with actual results. I try to link it with real something that's tangible, so I can actually kind of figure out whether or not I really need to put that gas on a foot on the gas pedal, or if I'm like, all right, man, you can cruise for a second here, you can cruise for a little while. But yeah, like you said, I think I'm always tend to full force ahead, and when I do have that moment where I need to be a little bit more kind to myself or be a little bit more graceful to myself, um I have that kind of awareness with the results, right? So
Yeah. Is there a specific clothing piece that you've created where you have like a great story behind it, or like, man, like this thing was like that you're really proud of, or like, man, this thing was like impossible to make, went through so many different types of trials and errors, but finally, we're able to get it to the finish line?
um in the past, honestly, no, because a lot of what we've done is pretty simple. But recently, I've been doing, like, right now, I'm wearing this, like, it's a knit, like luxury knit, right? It's a luxury knitwear made from merino wool. So this is something that, if you fuck this up on a bulk production, you're wasting a lot of money. Like, it's
Yeah.
not something that's cheap.
Yeah.
And so, recently I've been working on a lot of things that are more intricate, more details. Not so necessarily not the clothes, but I've had experiences where like these artwork pieces, like things like that, when we nail something like that, I just love it. um, you know I had an artist help me with because script font, because my handwriting is awful, so I had an artist help me really make a cool script font, and that was something that we nailed, and I was like, fuck yeah, like this is that piece. So I've hadn't had specific clothing pieces, but there's always really rewarding times. And ideas like, so the one out of zero, like I thought that would hit because it's mathematically undefined. It's one of none, all that stuff. And so like when I was like putting that together, I was like, yeah, this is perfect. This is what we're going to use, moving forward. So right now we got some cool jerseys that are being made. They're kind of knit jerseys, and they just got, instead of like a regular 99 or whatever number is on the back, it's one out of zero. And so
That's
I'm
sick.
stoked about some cool stuff, like that we're doing there. That's a little different.
I've
So
got I've got a great story behind the one of zero thing.
mhm.
So I used to at my old job, I used to work in real estate, and I was in the office, and one of the guys I was working with was just like, Doyle, like you're a 101. And I'm like, no, I'm not.
Right.
He's like, Doyle, no, like you're a 101. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I was like, I'm a 1 of 0. And
Exactly.
he was like, what? He's like, I'm a 1 of 0. I'm undefined. He's like, oh, he's like,
I
yeah,
love it.
you are a 1 of 0 actually.
I love it, man.
Um, and yeah, I mean, that's such a great brand logo, I feel like, to use. Just like, obviously you have the undefined text, but being able to have that brand moniker also of the 1 of 0,
Yeah. It's
that is,
perfect, man. It's perfect. And
it's very strong.
it's mathematically one out of zero is undefined, man. There's nothing that
Yeah.
can. So I was just like, when I hit that, I was like, this is perfect. This is perfect. I'm using this
Yeah,
forever.
being able to use a symbol and not just text, I feel like strengthens a brand
Yeah,
so much
without a
more.
doubt. Yeah, without a doubt.
Everyone knows the swoosh, and everyone's gonna know what, 1 divided by 0 is.
Right, exactly.
So, I know you've also talked about with the brand, from the ground up, brick by brick. Why is it so important for you, or anyone, just starting out and making an impact? Why is it so important just to focus sort of within your city and your community first, rather than having this, like, obviously it's great to have like a massive vision and want to impact, a large environment. But talk to me about that sort of, and I know you've talked about it on your podcast as well. Like, I'm just trying to talk to that one person who can change, their corner. Sort of, where does that mindset come for you, and why is that so important?
Um, it's kind of the podcast thing. I always, when I, make my podcast, and I do think about this a lot. Oftentimes, I think about, like you said, that one kid who's going to go out there and change the world, or change their corner of the world, whatever that looks like, right? I think about that because I think about myself wanting to do that when I was younger, and so I think of like talking to my younger self, or talking to myself right now. And it's important, man, because there truly is ripple effects with what people do. Like, I think people really underestimate, like, one person, like whoever you speak to, whatever you do, like one person really, like, if you change their life, you can truly change the world. Like, people don't get that. Like, they might become the dude who goes out and truly does some shit. Like, people don't think about the power of being able to be impactful or influential to anybody, whether it's positive or negative, right? And so for me, man, I always think about, if I really want to do big things, if I want to build fucking monster company and people really love it and they truly are part of the community and that's something that is like a household name or whatever. If I really want to do that, can I just impact that one kid first? Can I do that to that one kid? And then locally, like if I'm just thinking about in my city, like if I want to build a fucking company that's like Nike, man, if I really want to do something like that, that's mind shifting and it's changing the course of the culture and stuff like that. If I really wanted to do that, like let's fucking dominate the city first. Let's dominate what we're doing here first, right? It doesn't have to always be this worldwide thing. Let's get started here. Let's figure something out here. And so I kind of just think about, small scale, one step at a time, one customer at a time. Who are we going to impact? And not only is it a tangible thing that you can use to execute on, like if you're just focusing on one individual, you can make their experience so much better, but it's also a, legitimate thing, right? If you tell one person, if you help one person, it truly does impact, man. People really, really underestimate how important it is just to be locked in on, a single individual. How important it is just to help one person, right? I think that's always something that's all on the top of my mind, and it's something that's very powerful too.
100%. Yeah, and I feel like social media has diluted the our understanding of sort of the person behind that. We just see a number, like, oh, I got another follower, but like, and I had this thought literally yesterday. I was like, there's actually like a person behind sort of that screen who's like tapping on their phone, either liking a post or like messaging. So it's
Exactly.
like obsessing over that person rather than the follower or the digital account. It just goes to making that much more of a human and emotional connection, which is why I feel like Undefined is such a special part of that.
And that's something that, dude, it's not even only important, but it's something that you can tangibly use to actually build something. Like if you're connecting with one individual, that person tells another person, that person tells another person, and it grows like that, man. Whether that's in your business or whatever, man. Like if you want to build something, focus on that dude who's in front of you, give them what you can. I try to get through as many DMs if I have a lot of them or not. Like I try to answer even the most ridiculous fucking questions. Like people send me sometimes the craziest stuff. Like, dude, have you been doing this and that? And I'm like, yeah, man, I have been doing this and that. And it's like something they can, or something they can Google. And I try to do my best to be available, not because I'm important or any of that. It's because they're important, and it does matter. And what I do, who what they when they see me message them back, they do, actually care about what I'm doing a little bit more. They feel like, okay, yeah, this dude actually does post stuff and actually does care about this or XYZ. So it's a tangible thing that you can really use to get and to grow stuff.
Yeah, and I definitely think that people love that grassroots connection. People love an underdog story. People love the people who are sort of in the dirt with them, basically.
Exactly, man. Yeah.
And the last thing I'll say here is the vision is ours. It's a line. It's a line that you always say. And when I first heard you, write and say that, I was like, wow, like this guy's truly one with and for the people.
Yeah, man. And I always think about Undefined for that, man. And I really do. I have so much more work to do with that. But the vision is ours, man. Like what I'm doing is not for me. Like I don't, it's really like about a like obviously I'm doing shit to win and to grow and I want to make some money and I want to take care of my people, but it really is like I want to build something that people relate to and can connect with and I can connect with them with it, right? Like if I didn't see what I was trying to build, so I went out and I'm trying to do it, um and I always think about people who are going to join in with that, man, in the future, what that looks like, and I always hold that vision close. The vision is ours, man. Yeah.
Well, with that, Ace, I appreciate you coming on the Outworker.
I appreciate you, Tim. Thank you for having me, man.